Welcome to BookSwell Read and Relate, a vid chat salon celebrating books. I'm your host, Cody Sisco, and we start with our guest host, Eugene Owens from the Los Angeles Public Library Exposition Park branch. He describes how the library is adapting to the coronavirus crisis.
We revamped the whole thing to say library at home and to really emphasize all the ways you can access library services from your shelter in place situation. And can everyone see the screen? Everyone can see the screen? Okay, great. I'm just kind of giving you a little tour. At the top, it says all the libraries are closed until further notice. No late fines will be assessed for any overdue items that you have at home. And don't worry about that at all. Like, just return items when we get everything back together. And you can see if you don't have your library card handy or if you don't know where it is, you can get an e-card online, which is really great because we have so many things you can access from home. Being like a lot of this area here is our ebooks and audiobooks and movie and TV apps, and also audio, video, ebooks, audiobooks. Like we have all kinds of things, and I use them all the time myself. I especially like Overdrive and Hoopla Digital for my media, and I have them on my phone. And they're just another way of the library can come to where you are. And if you follow our social media, like on Twitter or Instagram, they're really emphasizing all the things that we're doing in this strange time. There's also all kinds of other stuff here. You can access Ancestry from home now. You can do research. This one I wanted to emphasize here, tutor.com. It's just an online tutor service involving professional tutors. It's mainly for K through 12 and adult learners to do any kind of tutoring from the comfort of your laptop or mobile device on any kind of topic. And if you're a job seeker or writing essays for college, you can even upload essays and resumes for review. There's a subscription to lynda.com. There's a virtual high school program. I mean, I could do this all day. And there's a really great online archive of photographs called Tessa, which is really beautiful. And you can, again, get to us through all kinds of social media. And I just wanted to emphasize that we're still working and we're still trying to get stuff out to you and to still serve our community. I just wanted to also thank Cody for being so versatile with his program idea. We've been talking about it for some time. I met Cody through another program I did. I've been doing queer-facing programming for some time. The library is mandated to do certain Heritage Month programs, like make some kind of observation of Black History Month, Asian American Pacific Islander Month, LGBTQIA Month. But I like to do all of those things all the time. I think all those groups are important all the time. So I don't keep my special group programming just to the 1 month. And that kind of attracted some attention, and I was invited to do a panel for the Literary Festival or to participate on one. That's how I think I met Cody. And, that's a lot of my programming, just kind of one thing leads to another. A lot of times I just cold call people on Twitter, slide into the DMs, and ask them to come and bring their stuff to me. And then I've been doing that for a while really successfully. And I'm really lucky for my management and my supervisors in LAPL that they give me a really free hand to bring whatever I like to bring to my community. And part of what I'd like to do is show my people that live in my service community, I want them to show all the things that is possible for them, but I also want to bring all of you to the library too, because so you can see all the stuff we're doing too, because there's all these different levels of people and audience that we're trying to reach. And I appreciate everyone attending and supporting the library activities. We're supporting you, you support us. We're all supporting each other. It's a wonderful thing. So that's about all I have to say about that. I mean, I should stop now because I can do this for an hour. So I should just put one on my head.
Yeah. Thank you, Eugene. I know we were looking forward to visiting you at the Exposition Park Regional Library, and now that we're safer at home, unfortunately that's not possible, but it's great that we're able to meet up online like this and provide the same programming to the patrons and to our audience. So thank you. This is the BookSwell Intersections Well, it's our live taping, so this is the first time we've done this, and hopefully it'll all go well. But I'm here also with my co-hosts. You've heard their voices before, and I'll introduce them again very briefly. We've got Sarah LaBrie, writer of Los Angeles.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. And we've got Dan Lopez, also a writer in Los Angeles.
Hey, Cody.
Hi. We've now, the three of us and with some of our co-hosts, have recorded in a lot of different places. We've been in Chinatown. I've been in Sarah's apartment. We've been all over the place. And now we're all each in our own homes, and it's a bit of a change, but we're making it work. I am super excited to also be welcoming our special guests. First, we've got Reuben Tihi Hayslett. Hi, Reuben.
Hey, hello, and hello, everyone.
It's good to see you. For those of our listeners who may not be aware, Reuben and Dan and Eugene and Lisa too, who I'll introduce in a second, had all come together also for our intentional intersectionality event last September for Lambda Lit Fest at the Armory. At Armory Center for the Arts, which Eugene mentioned. So it's taken us a while, but we're all together again. That's fun. We're also joined by Lisa Kastner, who is a publisher at Running Wild Press, and Running Wild is the publisher of Tihi's recent book, Dark Corners, and so that's why we're all gathered here today, is to talk about that and to talk about other fun literary LA stuff in the midst of a very sad and disturbing and difficult time. So it's okay to have all the reactions you have. We'll get through it. I want to start us off. Oh, well, hi, Lisa.
Hey, nice to meet everyone.
Welcome. So I'd like to start us off, and this is maybe a little bit selfish, with some tips on how we're all adapting to life in these times. It could be either personally or creatively. What are you doing differently or more of or less of now that our lives have been so changed?
So this is Lisa. I used to be a consultant, and I was very used to kind of making up my own hours. So I just made sure that I'm still getting up at the same time. I'm still working out. It's not the same kind of workout I used to do, but it's something. And I am using the time that I used to have for commuting as time to work on my own writing, because I also write as well as edit, because I'm the executive editor. So I spend that time working on my own stuff and then working on pieces that are in the slate for us to publish this year or next year. That doesn't mean it's an easy transition. It's just I make sure I have structure. And then honestly, things like this, where I get to actually see other people, helps a lot, at least for me. I don't feel as isolated. It's at least some type of social interaction. So, yeah.
On my end, this is Dan. On my end, I've been cooking, which is just not something I normally do. I was used to going out to movies a lot, which is another thing I'm not doing, and going out to eat quite a bit. And now I'm cooking. So it's actually been great to structure my time around that. My husband and I will just, make a meal every night, and it's like really great bonding time. And also that's led to a lot less money spent, which means I'm also shopping. Shopping a lot less, which is kind of interesting. It's good to have the savings, but also I kind of feel it's a horrible thing for the economy to not be spending money. So I don't know. I'm conflicted about that, but I will say the cooking has been very nice. Though I think I am going to get addicted to caffeine, because I used to only make myself like espresso on Saturdays and Sundays. And now it's like every morning I'm like, oh, I'll just make myself an espresso. I'm cooking at home. Why not? That's been kind of the day-to-day change for me.
Hey, this is Tihi here. So one of the things that I've been having to adjust to as somebody who's like a pedestrian. So like my job was already work from home, so that didn't change. And I'm used to just like spending a lot of time outside to get to all the places that I need to go. And now that we can't go anywhere, I had to work this out with my job, but I have like set sunlight time where I get at least 20 minutes of direct sunlight on my back patio every day, 7 days a week. But Monday through Friday, it tends to fall in the early part of my day. But, you know, I like had the conversation with my boss, like sunlight is really important for my mental health, and it's, you know, really important for our immune system. So I've been enjoying having tea every morning on the patio, listening to all my neighbors' dogs, but just getting a lot of like natural sun and just try to soak up as much of it as I can.
Can you also talk to Mother Nature about all these storms and maybe ask for a little more sunlight right now?
I'm working on it.
How about you, Sarah?
I have found that it's really easy to give in to things like depression and apathy when you can't leave your house and there's a global pandemic. So what I found really makes a difference is forcing myself to work out as soon as I wake up. I do like a YouTube workout. There's this channel, Mad Fit, which does pop song workouts, but then I shower and I put on makeup, and normally I put on clothes that I actually like would wear out, and it has made all the difference in terms of my productivity. Because I'm a freelance writer, I still have to meet deadlines. Like nothing changed for me except that like the urgency of those deadlines suddenly lessened a lot in the face of like what's actually going on in the world. But I still have to meet them to pay my rent. So
Yeah, so I heard good food, getting some exercise, getting some sunlight. These are really good pieces of advice for writers and for anyone who's struggling right now. So thank you for that. On the creative side, for me, I've been trying to just make some progress every day. It doesn't have to be a lot. You know, I'm doing a lot to, you know, for BookSwell and all of that, but like for my own writing, just getting a little bit done every day is helpful to feel like I've still got momentum and I'm heading in a direction and I'm not stuck, because being stuck is kind of the enemy of good creative output. I appreciate everything that you guys said. And maybe I can ask now, in terms of inspiration, are you reading differently now than you have been previously? Are you turning to different authors? Are you exploring different genres? Or are you reading more? Are you reading less? Like, has that changed for you? And you have any books that you'd recommend?
I have a book I want to recommend.
Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry. I read World War Z, and actually I listened to it, and it's such a good audiobook because they produced it like a podcast, or, you know, they brought in actors and dramatized it, and it's by Max Brooks, and it's been in the news a lot lately, so you guys are probably familiar with it. But the thing about it that's really great is that he did all this research into how different countries around the world and different, you know, like the military and different governments and experts would react to a zombie apocalypse, but it transposes perfectly to a global pandemic, because that's sort of what he was basing it on. And it's just sort of, I really found solace in the fact that like in this fictional world, people won, but also that there was infrastructure in place to fight it, you know. And it feels, when it's I don't know, sometimes when everything just feels a little bit hopeless, like it's nice to know that this person who's an expert in this field and did a ton of research knows that there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's a good one. It's one of those that they made a movie, right? Like, as well. I've been like wanting to watch the movie, like more than I've been wanting to read the book, just because my reading pile is already like, you know, a mile high. Like, in fact, I have this one, which is like 700 pages long. That's been here for like a month and a half. I'm like, that's going to be the next book I read. And then, you know, 1,000 other books come up for work and other things that jump the queue. But I have found that while I wouldn't say I'm reading more, I feel like I'm enjoying my at-home reading time more than I would before, because before I just read on the bus. And then when I got home, I'd be like, I'm just going to play video games or watch TV. But now I'm like baking in like the last half hour of the night to really just read before bed, so it doesn't keep me awake. and just, because otherwise it's really hard to find the time, even though it feels like in a way that all we have is time now. But like, I'm sitting at the desk to work, like where I'm sitting here, like I'm sitting here all day long working, and then I go like literally 2 feet this way to the couch to watch TV and eat, and then like the bed is like another 10 feet that way. So like, unless I like really delineate my time and say I'm gonna make a point of reading, I just end up like kind of in these same spaces and delaying. And also like constantly being surrounded by the books I have read and make me rethink about, what I'm going to read next or what I'm going to reread or that kind of stuff. So it's kind of nice to have like that physical presence here at all the time, reminding me of, all these great stories and all these great things that are out there to inspire me for my own writing and, for my work and all that kind of stuff.
So this is Lisa. I'd say 90% of the reading I do is actually associated with the press, which, big shock. But I have actually gone out of my way to say, okay, I'm going to spend like a half hour before I go to bed to read. So that way I too have piles and piles and piles and piles of books that I'm like, I'm going to read this, but like books and graphic novels and comic books. And so I'm just like, okay, I'm going to focus on this one. So I was actually invited to Tori Eldridge's book chat for The Ninja Daughter. So that kind of upped in the queue so that I actually will finish it, because I, got like a third of the way through and got distracted. Nothing to do with the book, more so just life. So yeah, so that's at the top of my queue. And so far it's fabulous, which I had no question it would be fabulous. So.
And we can look forward to the sequel later this year, The Ninja's Blade.
That's right, we can. And I'm so psyched. And actually, Tori and I go out for dumplings about once every couple of months. So I'm sort of bummed because it was about that time for us to go on our little outing. So it's something to look forward to once we're allowed to go forth in public.
I guess I might be the weird odd one out in that I'm having a really difficult time like reading, watching TV, like I just like I can't. Like I think the most since the stay-at-home order, the most kind of narrative television I've been able to watch has been like 30 seconds of a show and I immediately turn it off. So, but what I've been doing instead, because I just feel like, some sort of weird way of like I feel like I'm wasting away if I'm watching TV. And then like also with books, it's like harder. I've tried to pick up some books that were on my list and I haven't gotten more than a page or so through. But what I usually end up doing is like calling a lot of my chosen fam and we end up telling stories to each other. So it's like, it's a way of getting narrative in like a totally different form. Back when I used to live in New York, I used to do these storytelling shows like once a month around Brooklyn. And I have kind of missed that, but now I feel like I get a chance to do that like pretty much every day since we've been and stay at home. And the stories I'm hearing and like the stories I'm workshopping orally have been like really, really fun and exciting and like a little bit making TV and, the pile of books that I need to read a little less like, palatable. Like I'm really, really into the new experiences that my friends are having in this pandemic and, sort of like trying as much to be as present with them as possible.
Oh my God, I love that. That's fantastic. And it's
heard
like
some whoppers.
Really? Is it like alleviating the stress of everything? It's like acting as a real like escape?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Oh, we're so doing that.
Yes. We should do some sort of like wine virtual salon where we just all tell a story.
That'd be fun.
Right? Oh my God, that'd be fabulous. We have to do that. Or do like a virtual brunch with mimosas and like Bloody Marys. Yeah, and then they'll become even bigger whoppers because we'll be trashed.
No truth necessary. We can just tell.
What's the most salacious detail that you've heard in these stories? You can anonymize.
Oh my gosh. So a friend of mine is a sign language interpreter was telling me a story about how they had to interpret for a client as they went through a BDSM dungeon. as like a client of like another dominatrix, and like the different things of figuring out like a safe word for somebody who's deaf, right? And like where you stand, and like how you make sure you're in eye contact with everyone. And, you know, it's like, are you a participant at that point, or are you not a participant?
Wow.
As the interpreter.
I love that.
It was amazing.
That is so cool. You know you're writing that.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I'll tune into that episode of the podcast.
Sure.
Oh, can I jump in on this? Tihi, that actually kind of correlates to or tangents to something I want to mention as far as media consumption. Is I watched a few days ago the Crip Camp documentary, which is on Netflix. It debuted last week, and it's produced by the Obamas. And it was really powerful for me to watch as part of this disabled community. I didn't know about that. I had the experience of what many minorities probably already have, of like seeing something that was new to them in their history, of like, oh, why didn't they tell us about that in school, you know? And it was really, I often find a lot of discomfort in watching anything that's about me, like any of the different groups that I'm in, affinity groups. I sometimes experience discomfort with that for different reasons. And I'm really glad I watched this. It's a really strong movie, and it identifies everybody. And it turns out that my partner, we actually know I'm a friend with some of the participants that were involved in these protests that are depicted in the movie. And it also connects to what Tihi was saying about his anecdote about having, you know, there was people talking about hooking up at the camp, as you would at any time if you were talking about summer camp. That would be an element, you know, of your story, right? And what was interesting to me was like, oh, these are disabled people, Crip people, talking about this, you know, this sort of hidden history. And even for me, like being part of the community, I'm thinking, oh, we get to do that too. This is part of our life too. Like Tihi's friend or acquaintance gets to go to that thing, you know, and they get to do that too. That's all part of our life. That's what a part of our life that we all have, you know. And it was really powerful to see that talked about. I mean, it was only referenced a few times, and it goes back to, you know, Eddie Izzard, the comedian, has his joke about watching Saving Private Ryan, and where he says, if you just go into the camera a little bit and look to the left, you'll see all the other brown people who are also coming up on the beach, you know, from all the different parts of the British Empire, you know, but you wouldn't see that if you just watched Saving Private Ryan by itself. You wouldn't know that there's like tens of thousands of soldiers from all over the empire, all over the world, also running up that beach, you know. And it's that kind of thing where if you don't see yourself and your history portrayed in history, popular history, you think it doesn't happen. Like you think it didn't happen, like you weren't there, you know. And anyway, I'll just stop with that. I could tell you about a couple books, but Crip Camp on Netflix is what I recommend. Thank you.
I think it's really interesting, this idea of like representation and how it can kind of cut both ways, in that when we're not there, we feel erased. And when we're there, maybe we might have complicated feelings about that representation, right? We might be like, oh, that's like me or not like me, or I don't think they did it right, or that really got it spot on. How do you, T, why don't we start with you? How do you feel about that with your own work? Is there like a responsibility as an author to get representation right? Do you feel that, or do you have a different take?
Yeah, I do feel a big responsibility to think, you know, pretty strategically about characters and representation, and you know, like who you're choosing to focus on and why, and for like what means the story is going for. So I tried really deliberately with Dark Corners too to write, you know, from a lot of different perspectives: male characters, female characters, gay and straight characters. But I think also for me, as somebody who's like mixed race and racially ambiguous and like a queer person of color, like I kind of like ride along or teeter on the edge of so many different identities that I feel like it might be easier for me to like just sort of bounce into other people's heads. But yeah, it's been interesting since the book has come out. There's been like, you know, a lot of people like are like really happy about the representation. Some people do have those reservations of, you know, I've gotten questions like, why do you feel like it's okay to write female characters when you're not a female identified person? But I think as storytellers, stories are so powerful and representation is so powerful that we have to pay attention to these things. We have to be at least a little bit open to know that we might have some blind spots, and then we have to have the sort of integrity to like attack or not attack, but like to approach writing characters with authenticity, even if they have experiences outside of our own, you know? So by doing like, oh, I'm going to write a character who's a different race, let me make sure that I talk to lots of people of that race. Let me make sure I research the history. Let me research the history of the city that this person is from, you know, those sorts of things.
Oh, go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry. I've been asked this a lot lately. I for whatever reason, about, you know, can a writer or should a writer write outside of their own experience? And I completely agree with Tihi. Like, if the intent is that it's an integral part of the story, you have to do your research, right? You have to interact with those. If you are not of that background, right, you minimally have to interact with and be smart about understanding and kind of absorbing what they're telling you, right? And be observant in how people interact with them. So my husband is actually African American. He has long dreadlocks. He's darker skinned, and he's very he has a very dominant presence. And when we go out, it's very clear how people interact with me differently with me when I'm with him, and differently when they speak, if they don't realize we're together, when they speak to him solely, and then they realize we're together. I mean, this is not always the case, but the entire attitude, their entire, the way they're emoting, the way they interact with us changes. And it's being aware of that, you know, it is true. People treat you differently depending on how they perceive you or who they perceive you to be. And understanding that dynamic, right? And then being willing to explore that and being smart enough to say, you know what, I'm not a 6-foot African-American man with long dreadlocks and built like a football player, right? I don't know what it's like intimately. Like, I could not write his memoir, nor should I, but I need to be smart about when we're together, understanding about those differences in dynamics. And then, you know, even I believe in sensitivity readers, more so like, am I saying something here that I inadvertently don't realize is, you know, racist or biased or a stereotype, and educate me, because I just may simply be stupid, you know, I mean, to be blunt, that may actually be it. Like, I just don't realize what I'm saying is totally off base. And I want more authors need to do that. Like, you can write, like I can write as a male, Tihi can write as a female, right? And we can explore those identities, but you need to do your homework and do your research and really become part of whatever it is that you're trying to represent, if that makes sense. So I'll get off my soapbox now.
I love it. It's clear direction. You know, I think there's a danger in some writing circles. If your community is too homogenous, if it's too close knit and not open to a lot of different groups or groups outside of ones you might normally interact with, and then you're trying to write characters that aren't like you know, that's a risk. You might get it totally wrong. And then, you know, that's not a good place you want to be these days, right? Like, right. You don't want that to be the conversation about your book, because that probably wasn't the intent behind it. Yeah,
exactly. And sorry, on a simpler level, like, so I grew up poor. I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, which at the time was the most dangerous city in America. And there are things that I think are funny, like, you know, we had our water shut off or our heat shut off, you know, when I was a kid in the winter. So it was like, okay, grab 15 blankets because this is going to be a cold night. well, when I said something like that in a more upper middle class environment, people were horrified. They didn't realize that was like, I mean, it was true, but to me, it's funny because it was a simple experience that you make you make light of, right? It's part of the survival mechanism. But I wouldn't have known that that's a unique experience, right? That only people who've grown up in certain environments and would understand that. So again, it's just, it just depends on your personal experience.
Is that a risk with dark humor then?
Oh yeah, I think so. Well, I think it's a risk with any humor. So.
And it's funny because there's some people out there who just like don't fundamentally understand or enjoy humor. Like I remember like, you know, in different points of my life getting to know new people, and people are like, oh, I don't really like humor. And I'm like, what kind of human are you? But I think with like dark comedy, because I actually think a lot of the stories in my book, Dark Corners, are actually kind of funny. And
they're hilarious.
I'm like, they're only funny to me because I've been through a bunch of trauma and there are a bunch of traumatic things happening. So I'm like, it makes sense. But sometimes like people really don't take it that way. And so it's kind of hard with dark comedy, I think, especially. You have to read the room and you have to actually trust your audience, that your audience will go with you to the morbid place and will find that humor there with you. You can't always just like set it up for them, you know? So I think it is risky. I think like slapstick is always the easiest kind of comedy because it's just visual and stupid. But like the more highfalutin comedy is more probably for the dark comedy.
The first time I encountered you was at a reading in Portland. I think it was one that Running Wild had maybe set up. Lisa Montaigne, I think, had put it together. And I saw you read the story about Celia Washington. And I was like, what? Like I was, belly laughs. And that was like, okay, I got to figure out what's going on here because I'm bowled over by it. And so maybe you can like, what's the premise of that story?
Yeah, the premise of that story, which is it's a lot of fun, is this woman who finds out that her husband is cheating on her, Celia Washington, who isn't just any old person, is like her nemesis from high school, right? And her anger and her betrayal really put her on this path where like two things happen. She kind of like mentally falls apart, but she also physically undergoes these supernatural changes. And it's, it's intentionally ambiguous. People are like, did she turn into a demon? And I'm like, I don't know. She's not human anymore. She just kind of like lost both of those aspects of herself while obsessing. And it's one of my favorite stories. I actually revisited recently because I'm like going through the end of a relationship and a breakup. And I was like, wow, how prescient of me.
There's a magic in that story and in a lot of the stories in Dark Corners that's related to either like trauma or like the recovery. What?
Yeah, it's I think that's a product of the fact that I've just gone through a lot of fucking trauma in my life. Yeah, I was talking about this recently actually. I think that like for the most part in mainstream media, most of what we see about trauma is that onset of trauma and like this thing happened to me, I have to make some sense of it, and then I overcome like one seemingly easy obstacle and suddenly I'm done and cured, like a lot of those like uplifting stories of like the doctor said I'd never walk again and now I took my first step. And it's like the first step might be the place where Hollywood concludes that story, but that story is so rich and complicated because it's a 10-year story, right? It's not always so much about what you do after the onset of trauma that I find interesting. I think what's more interesting is how you continue to live your life and in some cases build your life around or outside of those things. And I feel like, at least for me as a reader, like I don't often read those stories. So there was like one thing that I was pretty intentional with Dark Corners is like, we're going to take these characters and put them in awkward situations. But a lot of it is not necessarily about the onset of that trauma, but about what that trauma does to them over time.
Yeah. And how, from what I read, how they read the unfolding of their life through that lens and react because, you know, they're seeing things through that lens.
Yeah, I wanted to jump in and say, like,
there was so I'm sure, I just want to show the book because it's so pretty and good. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, like, I love that idea of like following the afterlives of the traumatic event and like the afterlives of the recovery and their slow recovery and all that kind of stuff. Like, so I think you're right. I think that often isn't the sexy story that people want to tell. But what I also like about that is that a lot of times writers default to like trauma as characterization, and like that can be true. Obviously, there are events in our lives that like establish who we are as people to a large extent. But I think oftentimes there's an element that informs your overall character. And when you see it, as you're talking about, like 10, 15, whatever years down the line, that has been like sort of baked into your personality and might be informing your decisions, but it's not, oh, this character is the one that was abused, or this character was the one that, like, you know, had some horrible thing happen to him or whatever. And so I love that, like exploring what it looks like to have a trauma and live with it without it defining you.
Yeah, and so I was going to bring this up earlier and then I didn't, but because I have it here, it's exactly on topic. I just read this book, Cam Girl by Issa Masay, and there's a very similar element to what we're talking about in that, like, the trauma that she has undergone in her life comes into the story at the very end. It's kind of like almost in an epilogue to say, and guess what, you know, I'm working on some stuff and I'm moving through it, but the entire journey of this memoir was about kind of her evolution through being on camera, like in a sexual way, and what that allowed her to discover about herself. So like the trauma is so far backgrounded, and what is foregrounded is her kind of working out these drives that she has and these behaviors that she knows she's stuck in. So she's trying to like work around them. So in the end, she talks about her experience. Well, I don't want to ruin it, but in the end, she talks about her experience as like how she evolved, and the trauma part of it is so deeply in the background. It's really interesting. It was the one book over the last couple of weeks that like grabbed me and kept me reading all the way till the end.
That sounds awesome. I saw your Instagram stories about it, and I was like, another book that's going to go on the list after the pandemic is over, when I can finally start to read again.
Yeah.
I just wanted to speak to that. This is Sarah. I am reading right now Chanel Miller's Know My Name. And if you remember her, she was the victim of this horrible sexual assault at Stanford, and the person who did it, I think his name was Brock Turner, was only given 6 months probation or something ridiculous, and was in the headlines for a while. But she ended up writing this letter to the judge, just explaining who she was and why she was so, how she'd basically been traumatized. And then the book it just goes into who she is as a person and how incredibly difficult it was. It was almost worse after this horrible thing happened to her, trying to defend herself and, you know, seeing the things that people were saying about her online, and then going to court and going up against this lawyer. And she's just this totally normal girl. She's an artist, and this thing just upends her life. And the way it seems, the book is incredibly well written, and part of its power, I think, is just knowing that she's aware that she's one of millions of women who has to go through this every year, that they don't necessarily get these big public platforms and voices, and she's speaking for them as well. And it's just so important. And it's definitely like you were saying, Cody, like one of the books that I have been able to sort of actually make my way to the end of, just because it's so powerful, the voice and her mission and the writing and everything that happened. I don't know what it is right now. I'm really finding myself turning to nonfiction for some reason, even though I'm a fiction writer. I'm usually very much a fiction reader. that maybe it's just wanting that community, other humans going through something, and how they get through it.
Yeah, it's what we need right now. I mean, it's what is scarce.
I think one of the interesting things too about nonfiction, because they say with fiction that fiction is the lie that tells the truth truer. So with fiction, you're trying to be very believable, but push the envelope. But with like a lot of like nonfiction and memoirs, sort of like the ones that do captivate attention are the people who just so happen to have extraordinary life circumstances. So the things they go through are like unbelievable to a certain extent. Like even this book that Sarah was talking about, Know My Name, because like, yeah, it's pretty relatable to, experience a sexual assault like most people have, but for it to be that Brock Turner case that was like all over the news, all over the world for such a long time, like that is so far beyond our normal experiences or what we would believe to be possible to happen to us. And I think because the pandemic is like a really unprecedented time, that it feels like it sort of makes sense that we're reaching for stories that are like as extreme as our lives are right now to help us sort of like digest what's happening to us in a sense. I feel like I totally can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love a curated list of extreme lives memoirs to tear through right now and be like, so what was that like? Because I'm sure I'm sure I can identify with that a bit.
Yeah, like what was it like to leave your house?
Extreme lives on the street, like.
That's awesome. Can you remind me? I don't remember what outside looks or feels like. I guess I'll read about it.
Yeah, are there any like locked room, either like locked room mystery stories or tales of confinement that we should be reading? I mean, I don't know. I feel like this could. Go ahead.
Wasn't that book the movie The Room based on a book?
Yes.
Yeah, by Emma Donahue.
Yeah, so pick that baby up.
I read that one pre-pandemic and it was a lot.
It is a lot. I read it a while ago. It's a lot.
I kind of want that. I mean, I've always been into like horror fiction, but I mean, maybe I need to now go into like true crime and all of that too, to just like, I'm having the feels anyway. I want to like attach a stimulus to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say I've been like jonesing for anything that's like the Orient Express, like that type of like mystery in a locked place, like preferably on something moving. Like every time I'm on Netflix, I'm like, why isn't this a category yet? There's like low commitment TV, but there's not like locked room mysteries, like, so I keep wanting that kind of stuff. But I would say another good one, Cody, for that type of thing, for fiction at least, is like Michael Crichton, things like Sphere, those classic ones. It's like, I've always loved a situation where people are locked in a place and that's it. Like humanity just goes off the rails. So this is maybe the time to revisit that for me. I have it somewhere around here.
I'm looking right now at a very, very old copy of The Andromeda Strain. So maybe I'll work through that. I mean, it's a very short book, but that's Crichton at his most terrifying. So
I actually got
prescient.
solace. I got solace from a friend of mine recommended watching The Greatest Showman. And I was like, it's a musical for those who don't know. And I was like, okay, I haven't watched a musical in a long time. I guess I really needed to cry because I was bawling like the entire film. So if you really kind of need to have that emotional vent, like a reason to cry, that'll do it for you. So
check that out. We lost Tihi, so hopefully we'll stick around and he'll be able to come back on. I know that there's been lots of like internet issues at my house and around in LA just because everyone's online at the same time. Good. I love these recommendations. Keep them coming. And I
have to jump because my husband is gonna try to make dinner without me, and I know not to be like heteronormative, but he's gonna burn down the kitchen if I don't. He's trying to use my Instant Pot and I don't want him to break it. But I do want to say also just because I feel like I have all these books that I bought impulsively and then didn't read, and now I'm reading just because they're staring at me and I feel guilty. One of them is Lydia Davis's essays, and if you're interested in writing nonfiction or Lydia Davis is an author, it's just a forensic explanation of how her influences and how she writes, and then also it's an anthology of all her work, and just it's impossible to read in one sitting, but just making your way through like 15 or 20 pages a day is just incredibly calming. It's beautiful writing. It's, she's a genius. So that would be my last recommendation. And sorry, I have to jump a little bit early. But thank you so much. It was great to see all
Thanks
of you.
for being here. Yeah, it's great to see you. And good luck with
Lovely
dinner.
seeing you.
Thank you. Bye.
Tihi's back.
Yay!
And hello.
I am. My phone just like self-shut down for no reason.
Fabulous.
We got a recommendation from Sarah before she had to jump off to read Lydia Davis and her work on what inspires her writing and how she approaches essays, which I'm going to do for sure.
Sounds like a good one.
Has anyone, I'm just looking at like books that are on my list. Has anyone checked this out yet? Read Me Los Angeles. It came out from Prospect Park like pretty recently, Prospect Park Books. And I guess Katie Orphan used to work at the Last Bookstore for a long time downtown, and then has put together this book, which is kind of like all about the literary culture of LA. So I'm going to check it out and then maybe be able to talk about it informedly at one of our future podcasts.
That's awesome.
Heck yeah. One of my friends out here in Long Beach works for the Long Beach Historical Society. I've been meaning to check out their website, but they've been posting some like really interesting stuff about like what Long Beach used to be like and the different weird. Like I found out this recently, but the guy who like designed the toys for He-Man and Skeletor got like the idea for Skeletor from like freak show exhibit in Long Beach way back in the day.
Wow.
I was
cool.
like, wow, I live in the city that is basically Skeletor's hometown.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, I guess. Wasn't Mattel here? So like, imagine all those like action figures and stuff like had a mind meld with Hollywood and all of that.
Yeah.
I see that Eugene has a list of recommended readings. So if you go to the public library's website at lapl.org, and we'll put this link up on the BookSwell website, there's a sort of curated list. So we'll take a look at that and we'll make sure Dark Corners is on there too.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask, we're running up against the hour, but Tihi, what are you working on next?
That's a great question. And I'm sure Lisa's going to be really excited about this. So I had this idea of doing this short story collection that is like more science fiction and futurism. So sort of like queer Afro-futurism and what that looks like, and trying to imagine like a future civilization that's like post-white and stuff like that. And it's a lot of fun thinking. But since the pandemic, actually, I have a half-finished novel from grad school that I think I'll just finish during the pandemic whenever I can like get back to writing.
Why not?
Yeah. Also, it's about a group of African American college students who want to get revenge on, white supremacy by kidnapping and torturing a rich white man in the basement. And since we're all trapped at home anyway, I was like, this will actually be really easy to get back into the character of the hostage, since we're all hostages now. So I think I'm going to start on that next week, actually.
Revenge fantasy. I mean, we're going to have to talk more at some point about the stories in Dark Corners, because there was like germ warfare in there, some dark fairy tales. I loved it. So tell me, like, when you're in that space of writing this character doing something that's like horrendous, but then you think back and you're like, oh no, but people have been doing horrendous shit all the time. Like, what is that? Where were you going with that?
I feel like, to me, I think the thing that's super interesting is people who do terrible things for the right reasons. So I try to figure out like, how do I get that character to a place where this is a thing that makes sense for them to do? Like specifically with like the vampire story, Come Clean at the end, where these kids, you know, cut their mother open. Not to spoil the rest of it, but it took a lot, and it was I knew that that's where I wanted to go in the story. So a lot of the building up, a lot of the creating tension was like slowly hinting at this idea and like really carrying the main character through this bridge, so that he can be able to do this horrific thing to his mom. But he was doing it somewhat for the right reasons. Like, he loved his family. He didn't want to see his family get ripped apart. He believes his mom is a vampire. And so, like, the thing that makes the most sense is for everyone to become a vampire. And that way the family stays together. And it's like, that's an insane thought, but like, it makes sense, you know, if you can like build it in so that it makes real sense for that character. I think that that's like, you know, the really emotionally fertile places to be.
Sweet or not sweet? I mean,
No, that
maybe
was
a little
my,
sour, salty.
it was my favorite. It was my favorite of all the stories, because it was just so unique and so beautifully done, and you laid all the breadcrumbs really well and took the reader to the place where it was like, of course these kids are going to do this. Like, why wouldn't they do this? Right? So, which made the end like that much more powerful.
Yeah.
I'm always impressed by people who can write from a child's point of view.
It's hard. It's harder than you think it would be. Also, I remember when I was writing that story, I actually had to like spend a whole evening like apologizing to the mother in my head, like to the fictional character. I was like, I am so sorry for what I'm about to make happen to you. Like, I feel really bad, but like it feels necessary for the story, and just like really sort of like getting through all of my guilt. And once I was done, I was like, okay, time to write the scene.
Right. But to your point, the story can't work unless the character, you as the author, have built a background or built the impetus for this character to do something that's horrid in a way that's logical for that character, right? That if that empathy isn't there in understanding that the horrid, either an evil character or a character who does something evil, then the reader can't actually enter into that character, right? Because that emotional engagement doesn't exist. And that is just, which is why a lot of authors, like when they talk about exactly what you're saying, either they find themselves apologizing to the victim of whatever that activity is, or they actually like, they have to go off and do something else to get out of that mindset, that understanding, because you feel nasty, right? Like when you're writing from the point of view of a character that is doing something evil and they believe that it's the right thing, you just, if you're really immersed in it, you feel sick, you know, and you've got to find some way to cleanse yourself of it. So it's interesting that your way of cleansing yourself was to apologize to the mother. It totally makes sense.
It was really strange for my roommates. They're like, you're apologizing to who? What? What are you doing? Why are you crying?
That's awesome. Or like, oh, so you were doing it out loud? I know people who will write a letter to the victim. Like, I'm so sorry that this happened to you, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm.
One thing that I used to do, which I can do more now because I live at home, is actually try to like physically embody characters and just like walk around and like, and I also used to do this in public when I lived in Austin, when I was starting to work on the novel that I wrote, you know, half of it in grad school. I would try to put myself in the mindset of my main character and like get on the bus and go out to bars and clubs and meet people and like totally be like, how is he responding to everything? Like, what are his instincts? And it was really great for helping figure out how to get in that guy's head. But his head was not a very good place to be either.
No. It's hard, but when it's done right, it's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to, I feel like most writers will understand this, but like the pursuit of trying to get inside the head of your character can take you to really, really extreme places.
Oh yeah. Well, because oftentimes as you're even if you've written the character's backstory, right, you know how they grew up and you did all those different exercises, as you're writing it and as you're actually fleshing out the narrative, you're discovering, and suddenly you're like, oh my God, like I had no idea he would do this, right? And, and so that unfolding, it's, you're experiencing it even more than the reader would, right? Because you're coming into it from that emotion. The reader is learning the emotion as it's being revealed in the reading, but you are living that emotion because you're the one who's writing it, right?
I almost feel like sometimes we're filtering. Like with our imaginations, we're imagining the character doing all these different things, being motivated by that emotion, but then we're deciding, okay, which of these is the one that gets into the story, which of these are the ones that gets showcased and that actually happens that the reader sees. But the larger picture has to live in our imagination.
Well, honestly, that's why it helps. So like writing the book that Tihi was just describing, a lot of authors would pick third person or third person close or omniscient because that provides an emotional separation that you don't have to get that engaged, right? Versus first person, where first person, like you are the character. And it's also why first person is so incredibly popular and so many people are drawn to stories written in first person, because you will, if it's written well, you will be immersed in this, right? You will be in that world. You will become that character. But for the author, especially an unreliable narrator or one that's of malintent, man, if you're the author writing it, woo, good luck. It's going to be a ride.
I'll jump in on that one for sure, because I like what you said about the perspective choice. So when I was working on like my first novel, it's right back here, but
show us the cover.
It's this one. Oh, gotta turn. It's that one.
Right.
But it's one of the narrators of it is a serial killer, and so I chose to do those chapters in the second person because I wanted to do an ability to get you really close to story in a way that, like, if you're telling yourself a story about yourself, you can be more honest. That was my working theory. Like, the serial killer can be much more honest with himself as if he was speaking to someone else, and if he was like, I killed this person for this reason, or whatever. But it was to, like, what you're saying, to what Tihi is saying, like, it's tough. It was a tough mental place to be in, and the timing when the book came out and like just the things that were going on in the world, was like, I don't know if I could do this now. I had not been doing this for like 10 years already. But yeah, I think that's a really great point about choosing the right perspective when you're doing these like tough narrators.
Yeah, I think second person is so fascinating, and it's actually the person that I like really enjoy writing. I will definitely check out your book because I love reading second person things. I think it also provides for your character that they have some veneer of separation amongst themselves, So because like that's how they relate themselves to things, is they don't see I as them being inserted, but they see you as like, sort of them having to remind themselves to be human almost, which I think is fascinating. I really love writing the second person.
But it can also be hyper aggressive, right? Like, because it's almost like an accusatory. It can be a very much an accusatory point of view, because oftentimes someone who is of like when they're angry or they're to your point, they want emotional separation from what they're saying, but it's almost like they're trying to transpose that emotion onto somebody else. So they're using second person. So it can be, to your point, both of your points, it could be incredibly engaging, but oh my gosh, it's almost like being hit with pellets, right? Like someone just keeps banging you in the face every time they talk. It's like, what the heck's going on? Yeah.
I feel like it's a high risk choice. Like either people are going to be into it, or you might also turn off a lot of people, and that's fine because there's something for everyone. But
that's true.
Going into it, it's like a lit firecracker or something.
Do you know of one, like usually to Dan's point, it's in a shorter narrative, like, so it's intermittent chapters. I don't know, or they're short stories. Does anyone know of a book that's all second person?
Can we make this a game?
Yeah, Bright Lights Big City was one. I think
that's right.
There's a Tom Robbins. I think one of his books is too. There's a couple, but yeah, for the reasons everyone is saying, like it is a bold choice and doesn't always play out. And I think best to keep it in, short chapters if you're going to do it in a novel and stories. Otherwise, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah, I had about 3 stories in Dark Corners that are written in the second person.
Yeah, and they're all angry, just so you know.
And one of them is in second person with the 2 of the same people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One of the characters, a character meets himself in a bathhouse, for those of our listeners who haven't read it yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is my
meet yourself.
favorite story. It's my favorite. That one is my favorite story. I do like the vampire one, but one of the interesting things recently, so coming off of the news from Kirkus, I'm doing more press interviews about the book, and so like sometimes they're LGBT podcasts and radio shows, but sometimes they're not. And it's funny that like whenever I'm being interviewed by a heterosexual dude who has read the book, that is the story that we have to talk about.
Really? That's
Yes.
interesting.
Oh yeah, they're curious.
Yes, they have
How
a
would
lot
that
of
work?
questions and a lot of feelings.
Wow, that's interesting.
You've opened up the world for so many people.
One erotic passage after another.
There you go.
Well, I want to thank you. We are a little bit past our time. I want to thank you for taking the time to be here tonight. Thanks to Eugene, to Tihi, Lisa, Dan, and Sarah. This was a lot of fun.
Definitely. And thank you. You're fantastic for pulling this together and inviting us. Just totally, this was awesome.
Thank you everyone for joining the library program tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Everyone stay safe.
Likewise.
Yep. And stay home.
Stay home.
Right.
And
Please.
we will meet again.
Stay safe.